So I want to welcome everyone to, I think it's the ninth monthly meeting of 10-4CT Thermal Energy Networks for Connecticut. I'm just going to go right to the beginning of the presentations without any further introduction. Um, and I think that I did not prepare introductions for our first two speakers from Yale, David Vallerie and Julie Paquette. I'm going to leave it to them if they would like to say more, but they are the people most responsible for managing this important geothermal project in Connecticut. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to David, who I think is going to speak first.
Actually, Julius.
Oh, sorry about
Yeah,
that.
sure. I'll
Julie.
jump in
I'll
and
pass the mic.
thank you. I'll start by introducing myself and then David, when you step in, maybe you can take a moment to
Okay.
introduce yourself then.
hmm
Um, my name is Julie Paquette. I'm a registered mechanical engineer in Connecticut, and I am Senior Director of Engineering and Energy Management within Yale Office of Facilities. I work on energy projects across campus, and I'm really thrilled to introduce this project to this audience today because I think it's extraordinary and really setting the foundation for much of our work moving forward at the university. So let's go to the next slide. So just to set a little bit of context for the university, we do have a zero emissions goal, so intend to be a fossil-free campus by 2050. Right now, our fossil-based steam utilities, which have been in a district energy formation for over 100 years at the university, we're planning to replace those with a low temperature hot water distribution. So when I say low temperature, I mean anywhere from 120 to 140 degrees. We intend to generate that hot water with heat pumps. And in order to facilitate a ground source heat exchange for those heat pumps, we intend to install roughly 8,000 boreholes across all of Yale's campuses. So that's Central Campus, the Medical Campus, Athletics, and West Campus. And we recognize that 8,000 boreholes is not trivial, and we're going to require quite a bit of innovation to get those boreholes into the ground and learning over time. So going to the next slide, we're here today to talk about our first installation, which is on Upper Science Hill. And we're going to give a brief overview of the Upper Science Hill development program and then hone in on what we're learning with this first installation on our geothermal bore field. Let's go to the next slide. So this is a shot on the upper right-hand corner of Science Hill before the beginning of our development. And what we're doing right now is building new buildings to support quantum science, engineering, and material science. And this is unique for the university because in addition to the new laboratory space, we're making strategic investments in instrument development and in cross-department collaboration with a space we're calling the Advanced Instrumentation Development Center. While we're doing this expansion, we obviously wanted to make meaningful progress towards our sustainability and climate action goals, and this development completes the Science Hill. So looking on the left, you can see that this area of Science Hill is bound by Sachem, Whitney, and Edward Streets. And on the north end, we're building PSEB. We're building a chem safety building, which is physical science and engineering building, on top and adjacent to the existing Wright Lab. We're adding an addition to Wright Lab, the Advanced Instrumentation Center, and then new parking. You'll see tucked on the upper right-hand side is our new thermal plant. So let's go to the next slide. We knew to do this expansion on Upper Science Hill, we would need to expand and renew our existing 100-year-old steam utilities. So rather than taking that conventional pathway, and with the need there anyways, we really wanted to invest in a new thermal plant with a geothermal basis. So this is aligned with where we want to go. Right now, the plant will consist of four roughly 600 ton heat pumps and we're going to have 263 boreholes. We do have district steam and district chilled water as backup. That plan is going to support all the buildings you see in blue, and then also most of the buildings you see here in gray. So we're going to support existing lab buildings as well. In order to make that happen, the existing buildings are being renovated to reduce total energy and also to make them ready to be heated with low temperature hot water rather than steam exchange to 180-degree hot water. So we call that effort in the gray buildings Science Hill Ready, so that they're ready for hot water, and also as an acronym, Resilient, Efficient, and Decarbonized Yale. When this development is done with the geothermal basis, the total energy will be 20% lower than where it is right now, with a reduction of roughly 27,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is 10% of our total university inventory. Let's go to the next slide. So honing in on the bore field, you saw on the previous slide, we have this green space, which represented space that we thought we had surface area access to put in boreholes. What you're seeing on the left here is a mix of vertical and diagonal boreholes, which Dave will speak to as well. And what you're looking at is where the borehole starts and where the borehole ends, as if you're looking at it in an overview. We do have 4 distinct field locations and 4 manifold systems that will bring those boreholes back to our thermal plant. And we do have some additional space on the site that could accommodate an additional 38 boreholes. And just to give you a quick overview of our schedule, you can see about halfway down on phase 1, geothermal bore fields. We will be completing the bore field this summer after nearly 2 years of active drilling, and then the plant will come online 2 years from now.
Yeah, just to expand on that a little bit, we are actually finishing up drilling. Well, we had snow this week. It's either going to be Friday or Monday. We'll be done with drilling the 263 bores. So we are planning a lunch on Friday. We're calling it a bottoms up lunch instead of a topping off party. We're having a bottoms up party.
It's good.
Yeah, big to do. The next few months will be the horizontal piping and the ground vaults.
So we have learned a lot in the past couple of years, and especially in the lead up to the active installation. And so I'm going to hand over to Dave Vallerie to talk about that.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to be here. I see a lot of names that I recognize in the participants. So shout out to all of you that I know. I was a partner at Strategic Building Solutions, and then we sold our company to Colliers back in 2015. I have been at Yale for, for 3 years, about 3 years. And the opportunity came up to work on the geothermal wells, the bore fields project, and the new thermal utility plant that we refer to as the TUP. That opportunity presented itself to me, and after 29 years of being in my firm, I decided that this was a great way to descend my career, and the project was just something I couldn't pass up. It was a great opportunity. So we have some lessons learned. My exposure to bore fields and geothermal systems prior to this project was really on a building by building basis. A new building would go up and they'd put in a geothermal process in there. It was by no means, 2,400 tons of heat pumps and 263 wells. This is just a much different scale. And we learned some things along the way, and felt that it was a great opportunity to share some of our learning experiences with you folks. And I'm going to be talking about each one of these. I have a slide for each one of these. Um, but it was a mixed bag, everything from technical to site related conditions and everything in between. Um, the first lesson that I learned was the importance of your test boreholes. Um, so we did some boreholes back in 2022, a 600 foot borehole, and it kind of gave us the lay of the land of what we were up against. That helped us narrow down in what direction we were going to go in terms of I'll call it a vendor or a contractor for us. And once we had them on board, we did 2 additional wells. This is very important because really it sets the stage for the design, as you're going to see in subsequent slides. It really depends on the number of wells, the depth of the wells. Everything is based on the thermal conductivity and the performance of the wells. So you really don't know what you're dealing with until you do your test boreholes and then do your thermal conductivity test. This really sets the stage for the project. Once you know this, and then your design can proceed. We did select our vendor to help our design team, our architect and engineering firm, with I'd call it a design assist. It was really kind of almost a shotgun marriage where the 2 firms worked together to come up with the design for the boreholes. This, determined everything, determined our schedule, how we were going to handle spoils and water management, what the site logistics are going to be involved. We are in I would call it a semi-urban environment. We're not an open field in the middle of nowhere where you can just drill and the spoils can go on the ground and the grass will grow over it in a few months. We're in an urban environment. Anything we discharge off of campus into the city storm and sewer systems has got to be basically crystal clear. And then these wells also helped us determine what the ultimate cost of the project would be. We went with 2. We started off with 2 vendors. I wouldn't call it a competition, but really wanted to explore the bore fields with both firms. As you can see, depending on the firms, it depends on what the outcome, what the ultimate number of wells, depth of the wells. It really sets the stage. It's much like I equate it to if you're hiring a design firm for a building, an engineering firm for a building. There's more than one way to skin a cat. You can approach it in a few different ways. Neither of them is wrong. It's just different approaches. But as you can see, the number of boreholes, the depth of the boreholes, the number of ground vaults, as we call them, um, was very different. And at the end of the day, we ended up going with the firm with the 263 bores, and took that approach. So I guess the lesson learned was there are different approaches. It's not just a single way of doing it, depending on who you're asking and what firms you're working with. They have their perspective. Another firm will have a different perspective. So at the end of the day, we felt that the vendor that we selected was a better fit for our project and our site. The other thing that I learned out of this was the directional boring. Um, you can greatly reduce, because we had such a limited site for where the wells can go. We needed to be able to optimize. If we went all with vertical wells, we would need, I don't know, an area certainly bigger than what we have. I can't say how much bigger, but the directional drilling allowed us to have our wellheads tighter together with fingers that go out. So when we say 850 feet, depending on the angle of the drilling, it's 850 feet in length, not necessarily in depth. That's what our thermal conductivity tests revealed to us, that 850 feet was the magic number. Um, and This slide shows a comparison of vertical boring and directional boring. I won't get into all that detail. But the point of the fact of the matter is that there are directional drilling is certainly possible. And in some cases, like for us, we had to do it. Safety state regulatory constraints. This was interesting. I did not realize that the Department of Consumer Protection was who regulates closed loop geothermal systems. And specifically, it's I'm going to cheat, sorry. It's the State Plumbing and Piping Work Examining Board is who is underneath the Department of Consumer Protection. So we work very closely with that board. On the right-hand side, you'll see an excerpt from the regulations. There was two regulations that we had to really were a challenge for us. I should also note that the closed loop geothermal systems, the regulations that exist, I would say are didn't really take into mind that 263 wells in a semi-urban environment. It felt like they were more for smaller smaller installations, single buildings, and not a large plant like what we have. So it was interesting. It was very interesting interaction between. There was one challenge to us in the regulations. I have a blue box around number 3, and it was the setback that was required to anything underground, storm piping, sanitary piping, rainwater retention systems, duct banks, anything under the ground. Really, we had a 10-foot setback that or clearance that we needed, above, below, and to each side. This was a challenge for us because of the semi-urban environment. As you can imagine, Yale has a lot of utilities underground. And so working in and around those was a challenge. Excuse me. At the end of the day, we had to go for variances or exceptions to some of those regulations. And so the first one was we had 22 occurrences with the horizontal piping, as we call it. So the horizontal piping, which connects the wellheads to the ground vaults, and then from the ground vaults ultimately to the thermal utility plant, we had 22 occurrences where we said we're going to be within 10 feet of those pipes of the other utilities. For the boreholes themselves, we had 62 occurrences. Remember, we were drilling 263 wells. And I believe this included the 39 alternate wells, which we have not drilled in these numbers. So horizontal piping and the boreholes themselves were a challenge for us. And also we had 26 occurrences of where we were going to be undersite stormwater infiltration systems. We have a large, to the south of that future building there, that area in yellow, we have a large water retention system, and we did some directional boring underneath that area. Um, it was interesting. We worked closely with them. They were very appreciative of the fact that we were so forthcoming. We give them reports every quarter on where we stand, and we don't sidestep anything. We tell them what we have. I think there was, in my feeling, there was a lot of motivation to make this project successful, and they wanted to see it happen, and they were great in working with us. They've been a good partner. Let's see. This is probably the most eye-opening lessons learned that I had, was what it takes on a site like this to manage the spoils and the water. It's a very water-consuming process, whether you're mud drilling or air drilling, or what comes out of the ground, especially here in New Haven, there's a lot of that red rock. So when you're drilling, just the mud and the muck comes out. It cannot be discharged into storm or sewer, so it has to be treated. And the treatment process was very eye-opening to me. So in the center of the screen, we have our drill rigs. On the right-hand side, the soils. So from the drill rig, the soils go into really a settling tank, and the water is removed. And basically, in order to truck off that's the majority of the soils that will be removed as part of the process. I'll describe it as they're almost pellets, like you would burn in a pellet stove. But basically, the spoils has to be more solidified, if you will, so that it could be trucked overland to the dump site. The other side of the graphic is where it gets challenging with the water. So the water goes through a whole series of collection tanks and weirs, centrifuge, bag filters, carbon filters, and then ultimately it can be discharged into the storm systems. I have some pictures that give you a sense of what we're talking about. So the pre-treatment, it goes into a tank and it settles out. And then on the right-hand side, the upper right, is where it's solidified enough where it can be trucked off-site. Early on, we were bringing in containers and removing the tankers. Now we're doing what we call live loading, where we'll just empty out the containers into trucks to be shipped off-site. Bottom left is a picture of the centrifuge, which does a great job at separating the soils from the water. And then it goes into some pre-treatment tanks. And then it goes into a bunch of tank and weirs and settling tanks. And then it goes through bag filters and charcoal filters, and then it get offloaded off-site. So the amount of work that was, and effort and money that goes into, and real estate, honestly, that goes into treating the spoils and the water off of our site was eye-opening. We had a lot of eyes looking at us, a lot of people testing it, and it was a big process. Another lesson learned: our speed improved over time. At one point, we had 4 drill rigs on site going at once. For the last couple of months, it's been more like 2. There's 2 shown in the picture. But we started off, yeah, it was about 3 days per hole is what we started off at, even 3 to 4 days per hole. And then as the water treatment process got improved, as the logistics got settled out, as the drillers got to know our subsoil conditions and where was rock and where was not. At the end, we were doing about uh, a bore and a half a day per rig. So we improved our time in the drilling by about half over the life of the project. Over the last year and a half, we've improved from 3 to 4 days to about a day and a half per hole. The drillers get to know the area. There's at the very end, there was a sweet spot between mud drilling versus air drilling, and I'm not a driller myself, but one is more appropriate for rock and the other for more traditional soils. But it was the point is it improved over time once they got going. Now we're drilling 263 bores. A lot of times when you're doing something for the first time, you don't realize how to improve it and how to make it more efficient, because by the time you figure that out, you're done. What else? Julie, before we jump to that, I just wanted to share. Yeah. Okay. So this is a drone shot of our site. This is what we consider Upper Science Hill. This is the graphic that Julie showed you earlier. Prospect, Edwards, Whitney, and Sachem Streets. So if I zoom in, so of the 4 areas that Julie was referring to earlier, call it, this is one area, this is another area, 3, and then 4 is up top where we finished up. So our site drilling went from south to north. And this is the last area that we've been drilling is up here. It's hard to tell, but there's a big cut here. And this is where the old parking garage was that we tore down. Actually, another lessons learned would be know where your rock is. We had a challenge underneath the parking garage because we couldn't do any test bores under there. So we had a lot of unforeseen conditions, but this is a pretty good slope here. It's hard to tell, but there's boreholes all along Edward Street. There's a whole bunch down in this hole here. But what I wanted to show you was, so there's 2 drill rigs here, one up here and one right here. Everything else on that site is to support the drill rigs. So a lot of the water treatment facilities is over here. And by the way, that whole water treatment program had to happen over the winter that we've been having this year. So freezing conditions were a real problem. But settling tanks, the centrifuge, more settling tanks. This Quonset hut, temporary Quonset hut here is actually heated, because inside here is the excuse me, is the bag filters and the charcoal filters. But if you look at so this process, this water treatment and spoil process had to follow us around the site. So it got moved 3 or 4 times over the life of the project. So there's takedown and setup. Weeks go by just to move this equipment in order to get the water discharge quality that we were required to do. But I wanted to give you a sense of the amount of space that this operation takes up. This area is a lot of materials and Connex boxes. I don't know if we can see any, but there's spools of we had 263 spools of 850 feet of pipe that gets lowered in the hole. So just a lot going on.
David,
Yes.
to leave enough time for Debbie,
Sorry.
No, this is it's totally fascinating stuff. I should have left more time, but if you could wrap up in the next minute or two.
You got it. Julie?
Yeah, I'll wrap up. I've been trying to keep up with some of the questions in the chat, so thank you for those. There's a lot to say here, and we've learned a lot in the design process, the procurement process, and in this work, which has been going on for about 5 years. Um, you know, we do feel well positioned to move forward with our other major installations on campus. So that's a really positive thing. But we have a lot ahead of us. Like we feel pretty good about installing this bore field. We still have a lot to learn that we're in the process on readying the buildings that are going to receive this low temperature hot water. And then also operating the plant once it's up and running. Um, and then when we think about the university as a whole, we're still figuring out, how these, and I'm going to use the phrase geo nodes, how these geo nodes can be built and then eventually tied together to work as a single system, like our existing utility systems. So, I think I may be committing to coming back, to this forum if welcomed, because I really do, um, feel there's some wonderful lessons learned that can be applied elsewhere. So I'll
Well,
leave it at that.
the plant will be completed in the fall of 28, and that would be a great time, I would think.
Well, this was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much. And we would very much welcome you back. If you're up for it, Julie, I would say to people that they should continue putting questions into the chat. And I'm going to turn to Debbie now. And but although we want to respect people's time about ending at 1:30, typically we go over. And so hang around for even after that if you can. So it's with a real pleasure that I want to introduce Debbie New, a friend now in Vermont. She is the coordinator and founder of the Vermont Community Thermal Networks. And she's been doing terrific work in Vermont, sort of what 10-4CT has been trying to do, but she started, started 3 years earlier. So I'm going to turn things over to Debbie.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here today to talk about Vermont, and I am calling this the Vermont Report to share with you what we're doing on thermal energy network development on Green Mountain State that's mostly white at this point. But I imagine that when you think about Vermont, you're thinking about pretty pictures like this, which I want to acknowledge that Connecticut has this too. But I want to start today not with so much with pretty pictures, but with Vermont values, because they relate directly to how we're developing thermal energy networks here. And
Excuse me, Debbie?
Yeah.
Maybe you should turn your camera off because there's a little bit of difficulty and that would help you. Terrific,
Sure,
thanks.
no problem. So I want to highlight 3 Vermont values that are informing how we do this work in Vermont. And one is conservation, which is really important here in terms of preserving our open lands, both our natural lands and our working lands. We also have a value on self-determination, and we're coming up on town meeting here soon, where people still gather to make decisions together and exercise local control. And of course, there's duct tape. We have a great value on duct tape because it allows us to use what we have. So maybe you're already seeing how thermal energy networks fit into this. So I'm going to go back and go into that a little bit. So when we talk about conservation, we also can talk about energy conservation and efficiency. And we know that thermal energy networks use less electricity, and there's so many conservation aspects to a thermal energy network. Also, self-determination. We know we can keep it local when we have a thermal energy network in terms of control of the system, but also our energy dollars staying local in our communities. And in terms of duct tape, this just relates to making the best use of local resources, whether they're coming from underground through boreholes or waste heat, especially heat that we're already paying for and that we are sending down the drain or sending out of our buildings. So Vermont and Connecticut may perceive themselves as different states, but we do have a lot in common, probably some of these values. For one thing, we both have many rural towns that are dependent on oil. As Peter Millman himself has told me, that as much as the gas system in Connecticut is its own opportunities for tens in terms of it aging out and needing replacing, so is our shared reliance on delivered fuels. So I have it on good authority from Peter and others that about half of Connecticut uses oil. So that's an excellent opportunity to put in thermal energy networks instead where it makes sense. So similarly, Vermont values align with Connecticut's official marketing tagline, which I don't know if you knew that you had, but it's "Make It Here." And I just wanted to point out another similarity that Vermont needs to do a lot more to make it here, especially when it comes to energy, because we are the third state most reliant on delivered fuels. So we know how we do this matters. The many benefits of thermal energy networks, the local benefits in particular, make it an important tool for our communities to live out these values and achieve our goals. So this is a map of the potential for thermal energy network development in Vermont. This shows you in those gray areas are designated town centers where there's already a certain urban presence, and also intentional growth areas where we need to add more housing and to expand, and our industrial and commercial parks. So our idea of ourselves as rural, because rural is such a big part of Vermont, can get in the way of decarbonizing efficiently. It leads us to thinking about decarbonizing households one at a time versus the fact that we have many town centers and these other areas that give us an opportunity for neighborhood scale decarbonization. So imagine a similar map of Connecticut. I can imagine that you would have a lot of these areas and probably more than we do. So in Vermont, we've made sure that towns can do TENS. We passed a bill that is now Act 142, and it essentially allows all municipalities, no matter what's in their town charter, to own, operate, and maintain thermal energy networks, just as they do for water and sewer, with no state oversight from our Public Utility Commission. So with this authorization, we have a green light to focus on our communities. But how on earth are we going to help our communities figure this out? How can we help municipalities that are so focused on really urgent priorities be open to what's, for them, a new idea? So maybe we should start with a feasibility study, right? Well, actually, we're starting with some principles. One is to start with community-driven development, which is not exactly the same as stakeholder engagement. It's about starting with local knowledge and local priorities, and then starting from what we already have and what's nearby that can use that. We're starting small, and we're looking for to expand over time. So this is what it can look like. Here are some forms of heat that we've identified. These are real problems we're exploring. You can see there's waste heat and there's opportunity for geothermal core fields that can then connect to these buildings. So we're looking at a bakery and housing, a health center. These are buildings that have community and civic importance that can benefit everyone, community. And then we look for what can be phased in later. We see it's a lot of housing, but it's also more sources of waste heat. So more benefits locally. So this map represents where we are with this project in Bellows Falls, Vermont, which is a village on the Connecticut River. And you can see in purple the town hall. This area of town is sitting on an aquifer. So that is the source of heat that we're exploring here. Also, we know the town hall is easily retrofit because of what's already in there. It will yield civic benefits and it will save the whole town money. Plus, what's nearby in terms of heat, those blue areas and the orange place there, we've identified those, and we know that this whole area ties into the downtown revitalization efforts that are ongoing. So how did we get here? A feasibility study, right? Well, actually, we started with planning, with some basic planning tools, community workshops and thermal strategic plans. and I'm going to talk about each one separately. So community workshops in Vermont are hosted by a town committee or a local community organization that wants to bring this idea to their community. Essentially, it asks, what do we already have? What are our priorities, which you see on the left here? And where can a thermal energy network help us with our goals? It's a mix of presentation, discussion, and mapping. It's less about technology, and it's more focused on working with community members to find buildable projects, ones that address local needs and fit into what's needed and what's already underway. So some details on that. Workshops are interactive events where we start by thinking about heat as a precious resource. And you can see on the left on all of these tags, the words that people put down that they associate with heat. When they think about heat, this is the range of things they come up with. Heat has an important role in our lives here in Vermont. And then we learned about the benefits of thermal energy networks and a neighborhood scale approach with examples that are relevant to the community. We explore large maps to find where people already have excess heat. And then we talk about how they might organize a thermal energy network and begin a discussion of how to develop a thermal energy network in their town. The other thing that a workshop does is it helps to answer a central question, which is who? Who is going to move this forward? So a workshop helps to establish a local working group, which often consists of the hosting committee and interested parties. For example, in Bellows Falls, which I mentioned earlier, one of the working group members is part of the local delivered fuel company. It's a family-owned company, and he's from that family, and he's there because he's interested in energy, but also because this could be a business transition for that delivered fuels company. So he's one of the people showing up. And we're equipping those working groups with resources and the support they need to work with their community. Now, this hasn't always happened perfectly. I want to emphasize that in some cases, we're having to really work hard to form those working groups, and even backpedaling in one town where the town planner started this idea and then left, as happens in towns. And so we really need to create a local working group farther along in the process that then would have been helpful. So once you have this, then you're ready for a feasibility study, right? Well, a feasibility study is a chunk of change. We're finding that first, it's really helpful to do a thermal strategic plan. This idea is borrowed from Europe and Scandinavian countries where thermal planning is much more the norm than here. So we're using this as an early assessment before a feasibility study to identify what we need before we start to spend and design and drill. We use the plan to help people get to local ownership because the working committee can take it to decision makers, like a city council, so that they have what they need to be able to support a project and help find funding to support a feasibility study. So I want to focus on two elements of a thermal strategic plan. Essentially, it's a roadmap, comprehensive roadmap for getting from fossil fuels to a thermal energy network. And you can see that there are many components of the plan. Some are technical, like looking at thermal energy resources and loads, which buildings, how to cluster them, and identifying a priority cluster, as well as ownership and financial opportunities. But I'm going to talk about how we start this. We start with the history and character of the town. This helps to direct a feasibility study to what the community has identified for itself. It helps to ensure actionable outcomes from the feasibility study because it assesses the stamp that the history has left on the town, how people perceive and experience what they can do together, and their sense that they can shape their own community. So from that, we go to some actionable next steps that can help us community to focus on building a coalition, aligning with objectives locally, and establishing a clear governance model before calling on mechanical engineers to do their things. So I want to give you some examples of projects that we're exploring in Vermont. This one is in a small rural town, but in the center, where they know that they want to see more development here on Pleasant Street. And there's an opportunity to go beyond this yellow area to do more downtown as more development happens. But you can see that if we start with numbers 1 and 2, which are church buildings, which host community suppers and are really important to the community to have those buildings and to make sure that those buildings can be maintained and the church could afford to maintain them. And then we go through past 3 or with 3 over to 4, which is a grocery store, food co-op, where we can use waste heat from the refrigeration system. So we could start small right there, or we could keep going to number 8, which is a site for future housing development. And certainly site number 6 would be a potential for a geothermal bore field. So here is a larger town area that includes a county courthouse, a school, affordable housing areas. So you can see that if you start on the upper side of Washington Street with 1, 2, 3, and 4, you've got housing, a hotel, a food co-op, and a bakery. You have waste heat. You have parking lots for geothermal bore fields, and you could do just that. Or you could go across the street where you have another grocery store and a bank and the courthouse and an ice arena, which is a great source of waste heat. And then you could keep going to the south to more housing in the school. So these could be different nodes that then get connected over time. And here's an industrial and commercial park. Number 1 is a wastewater treatment plant that is right next to number 2, which is a biodigester with a factory in between. So there's so much heat there, and that heat could just help those 3 facilities, or you could connect them to other areas. Each area could be its own node, and they could connect over time. So the question is, if we find these resources and we put them into clusters, but then how do we help a municipality get to actual ownership? We're still working on it, and it's different in different places in the way it's emerging. But I want to emphasize there's more than one message that we're using. And I'll just focus on the yellow civic asset parts. We work hard to make sure people understand that TENs lower overall energy costs and that they're similar to water and sewer systems, so they're familiar locally. Our municipalities know how not only to own and operate them, but also to finance them. And then thermal energy networks do not have to raise taxes because they can be revenue neutral or revenue positive through selling heat into the system. So more to say here, and there's lots in this particular chart. You can see there's a link on this slide, so you can check this out later. But we also emphasize that there's more than one pathway to local ownership. You can see the lighter yellow is all community ownership that encompasses cooperative models. But also we have municipal ownership models that go from more municipal involvement to less. And we have examples here to show people that it actually is happening or has been in place in many areas, and these models work. So we're making sure to give towns the choice to see how they could be involved and possibly not involved at first, but then have ownership transferred to the town over time once a system has been de-risked. So I want to emphasize one final aspect of what we're doing in Vermont that is helping us move this forward, and that's the electric grid. We were able to put together a report that makes a case for thermal energy networks as a capacity resource for our electric grid. It forecasts the impact of broad deployment of TENs. If we could do a lot of them, what would the impact be? And it offers several recommendations, which includes, I want to say thank you, Connecticut, includes our version of a grant and loan program that is informed by yours. So this report is helping us show the value of thermal energy networks to key statewide needs, not just local ones. It shows that TENs can achieve grid reliability and resilience via many other urgent priorities. If we're putting TENs in to make housing-ready infrastructure where we need it, downtown revitalization to help with flood recovery and flood prevention, and also to meet our emissions targets, then we can also benefit the electric grid. So this gets more people on board. And we've learned to put TENs in the plan, whether it's a local plan, a regional plan, a statewide plan that has to do with the grid or with housing and infrastructure or resilience or our climate goals. There are lots of ways to start putting TENs out there to support local projects. And the very last thing is that I want to share what might be the most value we're seeing from this work right now in Vermont, and that's that thermal energy networks are actionable. And I'm going to do this by just sharing some words from Vermonters themselves. So from St. Albans, we hear the technology is straightforward and well established. Small groups can actually do this. It's achievable. And I like that we're not just replicating something prepackaged. We're asking questions, we're learning, and we're implementing it ourselves. So people are more willing, more receptive. Our town has agency. And probably my favorite one is this last one. This is meaningful work because it's a multiplier. It's unusual for one project to impact multiple things, but this has the potential to help us achieve other town goals around housing, equity, and more. I tell my son, if things were easy, everyone would do them. But this one is doable, and now is the time to get to work. So here is a pretty picture for you, and it might be Vermont, it might be Connecticut. It's actually Virgins, Vermont. But I wanted to share this just to say we have a lot in common, and it's been really helpful for me to learn from Connecticut, and I'm interested in what's useful here to you all. So I'll end there.
Well, thank you, Debbie, for a terrific presentation. Everything that I was hoping it would be. And so, given the time, and I'm going to open the floor for questions to either Debbie or Julie or David. And as far as I'm concerned, we can go as long as the presenters are able to stay with us. So just do a raise hand and I'll recognize you and we'll go from there. Well, I will get started. I'm going to take advantage of this. Julie and David, I'm really interested in the challenges and opportunities that you found in retrofitting existing buildings that were perhaps used to taking very hot water, maybe 180-degree water, and which are now going to be getting 130-degree water or something like that. Just like to hear more about that.
Sure, I will jump in on that. That is very key to supporting roughly 400 buildings at Yale, existing buildings with low temperature hot water in the future. And you know, the buildings in the current portfolio that I showed you on maybe the third slide are all active research buildings. And so they're active research buildings that we're not intending to empty out or to do a major comprehensive renovation within the time frame of the work. And so beginning roughly 5 years ago, we developed a method that we call our stress test, where we actively change the hot water temperature within the buildings and basically see what happens. We see in some buildings, you're pretty well positioned. Fortunately, engineers oversized systems in the past, and so you can heat just as comfortably with lower temperature hot water. In other buildings, you see issues right away, and we develop a retrofit plan. Ultimately, in these particular buildings, which are, again, research buildings, we're moving a lot of air. And so the building enclosure, the envelope, isn't as much of an issue as it would be on other buildings. On other buildings, absolutely, you would have to look at enclosure upgrades that are considerable to maintain comfort with the lower temperature hot water. We have a model of moving through the campus and doing the stress tests and understanding where we will be, at least to like as a preliminary orientation on this work. But it is absolutely a very big challenge ahead of us. Installation of the bore fields is somewhat more straightforward, as complicated as that is.
Terrific, thank you. Before I recognize you, Kevin, I just wanted to say that one of the reasons I was so pleased to have Debbie present here is that PACES has been talking to Debbie about the workshops that she and Jared Rodriguez have been doing in Vermont. They've done, as I understand it, 12 workshops so far. And we would like to bring their workshops to Connecticut. I spent most of the week along with my colleague Dan Rabin in Brantford writing a grant. It's been an experience. But that is very much part of our vision to bring workshops to Connecticut, uh, hopefully paid for by grant funding, and offering that opportunity to do workshops in a variety of Connecticut towns. So with that, Kevin. Kevin, I don't hear you. You're muted.
Now I'm better. So I live 2 blocks from the edge of the site. This is not Yale's first experience with geothermal. Can you talk about lessons learned from previous geothermal projects?
Sure, I can speak to that. So this isn't Yale's first time with geothermal. We have actually a number of building level installations. Many of you may be familiar with Croon Hall, which is an open well design with 4 wells that are 1,500 feet deep. Our Greenberg Conference Center and our Walpole Library also have that same installation. And we have 65 boreholes beneath the courtyards of our newest residential colleges, Franklin and Murray College. We learned quite a bit with Croon Hall, and in many ways, the performance of Science Hill and our water flows over time have impacted the Croon Hall installation negatively. We have not seen those same impacts on the more stable sites, which Greenberg Conference Center and Walpole Library. The 65 boreholes beneath Franklin and Murray work beautifully and really have been trouble-free. They're carrying relatively low levels of it's roughly 20% of our heating and cooling at those residential colleges. The rest is provided by our central utilities. So Science Hill represents our first utility scale geothermal installation serving multiple buildings, as Dave described.
Thank you.
Margot.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm curious, Debbie, what the pool of consultants look like for doing these planning projects. Is it difficult to find them?
The pool of consultants who can lead workshops and do thermal strategic plans. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe it's quite small right now. I'm working with Jared Rodriguez, as Peter said, to do these. And one of the benefits of bringing this to Connecticut is to train more people to do this work by doing this in Connecticut communities. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. I think that it's possible that civil engineers who are urban planner related people that could do this work based on their experience. But I also think that wouldn't be too hard to train more people to do this work. We've been doing community workshops for a couple of years in Vermont, so it's new to us still. And the thermal strategic plan is even newer. So I think that's probably the best answer I can give you.
Well, that's a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just say that one of the things that's exciting to us at PACE about the proposal from Debbie and Jared is this component of not just doing workshops in a variety of towns, but to offer a separate mentoring training to people in those towns so that they can reach out to other towns. Because through these 10-4CT meetings and webinars and discussions with various people we know, partly through the Connecticut Energy Network, which is a group of folks that stay in touch with each other who mostly are people on sustainability committees or green committees or energy committees or the like. We think that there's going to be a lot of interest in this. So yeah, we're very excited about the workshop process and opportunity. So, well, I have more questions, so I'll just keep going. Julie and David, so my understanding of the geology issue, what's underneath where you are, is that for the most part, that there are most places probably in Connecticut are okay for boreholes. It's really a matter of cost and sort of the design of the system. Would you agree with that, or do you think that there are a large number of places in Connecticut where boreholes would not function well for geothermal systems?
Hmm. Yeah, I can't speak statewide. We have done test boreholes in many locations on campus, including West Campus and the medical campus and various locations on Central Campus. And the thermal conductivity averages are pretty close to the number that I dropped in the chat. There are some variations. I do I do think um, the cost, of course, is driven by the installation approach. And we did learn in that secondary round of test boreholes that we did with Brightcore that between 600 feet and 800 feet was our challenging um, depth. And it did slow down the installation. Um, Dave spoke earlier about how over time the installation got a lot faster. And um, we've asked ourselves, like, oh, okay, well, so can we bank on actually, what was our fastest installation, Dave? Where are we now?
Day and a half.
Day and a half, right? So
Yeah.
can we bank on a day and a half at every other location at Yale? And we would never do that. We would always price it conservatively on the higher end and hope again to pick up those efficiencies because that time is the time of installation is very site specific because it's not just about the drilling. It's also about the site management, the water management, some of those other things that Dave described.
Yeah, that water management and muck management is totally new. I never have thought of that.
Yeah.
So I know that a bore field will act as a thermal battery from one season to the next, or that's what my impression of it. Do you, this is something I'm confused on. Would you ever drill additional boreholes for additional battery or thermal storage potential that you might not otherwise have with just the minimum number of boreholes?
Hmm. And maybe relative to more conventional thermal storage, like a tank of water.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great question. Our projects to date have not introduced that, although I will say this. When we were doing building specific installations, we were very much trying to match the capacity of the bore field with the demand of the single building. Now that we're trying to address the whole campus and we're on the early side of that, we're not really trying to load match quite the same way. The more boreholes we can get into the ground, the better it is for Yale. We're not trying to like optimize on a single match because we're trying to share energy across a whole campus. And we intend to be able to move energy across a whole campus on our shared utilities. So we haven't been in the position specifically of saying like, hey, let's overbuild so we can use more storage in the ground. It's more like, let's overbuild so we can use that storage in the ground for our next building,
Okay.
you know.
I,
So there
I
is that thermal storage element. Yeah.
yeah, I can say that I I'm a plant guy. I would love to have a 1 million-gallon thermal storage tank
Absolutely.
associated with this plant. It just makes operating the plant a lot easier. You can run the heat pumps at their sweet spot, and matching the capacity to the load. That makes it a lot easier. We didn't have that benefit on our project, so it's a little harder. You do have to pay attention to the ground getting saturated on a seasonal basis. You do have to pay attention to that. That'll be the round 2 in a couple of years when our plant is up and running.
Okay, well, it's 1:40. I have more questions, but I don't really want to. I'm sure you have other things to do today. So thank you very much. Debbie already left, but I'm in touch with her, and I'll be in touch with Julie and David a little bit. And yeah, you're totally welcome back. Just let me know when you want to come back. This was terrific, really. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.